were saying about the judiciary though, and saying how.
Oh, so yeah, I've been looking into um, just. Although I'm not a lawyer, it does interest me that the idea um, that the UK courts have just turned a blind eye to the law. I just no other way of actually saying it. It's so if you're in any doubt of how unfair the courts are treating, well, the British authorities treat Julian Assange, just look at the way they've treated oligarchs fleeing from Russia. Persecution.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me the other day. I haven't heard it. Explain to me how they've treated these Russian oligarchs compared to Assange.
So around 2003, between 2003 2005, there was a massive trial in Russia, and it was sort of the 90s was a big decade of oligarchs making huge amounts of money
Yeah,
from Russian assets, from the state assets.
yeah, from selling
Um,
off the Russian assets to the Americans, strangely enough, wasn't it,
yes,
and making all their money with America and the
and
UK as well.
a lot of money came over into the UK, huge amounts of money into the Isle of Man, offshore accounts, shell
Of
accounts.
course.
And uh, the big company, one of the major companies was Yukos Oil, and so you had these major shareholders that were arrested for tax evasion,
Hmm.
and there were a number of reasons behind it. They'd rigged auctions. So the state held auctions. They'd rigged the auctions. They were the only people that had bidders at the auction, and they bought up huge amounts of the assets. And they would then, I don't know, they routed oil in areas that weren't supposed to have oil or that they didn't have permits for,
Yeah.
and ended up with huge amounts of um, tax bills
Hmm.
from the Russian authorities.
Yeah.
Um, so there was one guy called Kordakovsky, and his partner Lebedev, and there were a whole number of other people that fled. So those two were arrested in Russia on
Hmm.
tax evasion charges and a number of other charges as well. There were actually two trials. There was so many
Was this
charges
before Putin came into power or just after?
just after.
Right, okay. Because he really did. He sort of ran on cleaning up the corruption and
Yeah,
actually, if you look at what he's done in that time since, it's quite amazing
yeah.
how the country turned around. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so but there were a number of people attached, other shareholders, other associates of Khodorkovsky, Lebedev, who fled Russia. Some of them went to Israel, some of them came over to the UK. The ones that came over to the UK, the Russian Federation wanted to extradite them to attend, to go to court because they were being charged with financial crimes, with tax evasion, with
Yeah.
whatever, conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit other things. So their extradition cases were refused, and the judge said that there was a guy called Workman, Judge Workman, and he said that the motivation, that the charges were politically motivated against the associates. There's one guy in particular called Alexander Timerko. He's a very, very big donor for the Tory party.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Khodorkovsky's case became known as politically motivated. That's how it was sold over in the West, and he
Yeah.
was made out to be some kind of capitalist martyr. And actually, if you look at the amounts of money that this involved, the court case involved, it was huge, huge amounts of money.
Hmm.
Um, but the courts were very concerned about their human rights. They didn't want them to be extradited, to Merco and the others to be extradited because they wouldn't get a fair trial, and all of this. So they could stay in the UK. So but if you look at the comparison of the crimes, so which one would you say is politically motivated crime? One is massive financial crimes, including defrauding the state. And the other one is espionage for publishing war crimes. Now, which one of those would you say is politically motivated more likely?
I would say definitely the war crimes thing would be the politically motivated one, wouldn't you,
So
Dina?
you'd think so, wouldn't you? So how is it that an extradition court will very early on decide that defrauding the state and financial crimes are uh, politically motivated, but they seem to be the same extradition court, different judges, same,
Hmm.
but British courts have no intention of recognising political motivation behind charges of espionage. So my question is, how is that? How can an extradition court decide, well, this is politically motivated? Um, so it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it.
I if you look at so this is why I've always said that this is why they've muddied the waters so much in the Assange case. Once I realised exactly what the issue was with Julian Assange, because if you're not paying 100%, if you're not paying attention to this case, and if you haven't, you don't know what the bloody hell's going on. The average person on the street doesn't know what's going on. The media are so adept at confusing matters and writing headlines that just make no sense whatsoever and muddying the waters and leaving massive amounts of huge information out of their reporting to paint a narrative. And obviously, they've been trying to paint a narrative that Julian Assange is a bad egg for basically a decade and trying to smear him and slander him to the point where then I think the British public will hopefully they'll go, oh well, good riddance to him. He's cost us millions in police hours. Who is this hacker anyway? Send him off to America, and there you go. He's a hacker, and nobody then will care about him. And obviously, he will end up then going to this court in Virginia, which is where Langley is, CIA headquarters. So everybody over there is either spook or a spook's wife or husband or a family member of a spook or
Yeah.
he owns the corner shop that sells to the CIA spooks. So you know what I mean? It's like their own bloody base, if you like. So there's no way that he's going to get a fair trial in that court, which is manned by everybody. Even the jury are going to be plucked from that area, from the area with the CIA, and he has no defence against it whatsoever. They can produce fabricated evidence, and he can't even say yes, I did it, and here's why. He can't even explain why he did it if he did it, which he didn't. So they're hoping that this is just going to go away because because he can publish secrets, and they don't want their secrets to come out the way he has done in the past. And obviously, the ones he published in 2016 were the real catalyst for this. Let's face it.
But I mean, the real sort of fundamentally, it's the impunity that's, how can anyone, if anyone, like you say, it's very, very complicated and it's very easy to not look at what's happened to Julian Assange because it's so complicated that people don't know where to start, maybe. That's why then, the campaign to support him is so important because they're the only ones really doing that. But it's the impunity of the British authorities, it's the impunity of the courts, that they can be concerned about the human rights of these very rich people who get their money from very dubious sources. And we've got to make sure they're sacrosanct, we've got to make sure their human rights are protected. And we've got a guy on the other side who has been deprived of everything, his family, everything, because he dared to publish,
To,
to
he did the
expose.
job of a journalist.
Yeah,
He did the job of an editor of a news organisation. and he's done the job of the journalist from what I can tell. See, the reason I got so involved in the Julian Assange thing, and I really did get active in it, and hopefully I did some work that maybe might mean something, or hopefully I if I could have just changed the mind of one person, then I've done the job. It's just, but the reason why I got so upset and angry about it was because I honestly believe, Nina, that if any Englishman, or the 99% of Englishmen, of British men, of Brits, men and women, if they were to have 10 minutes with me to sit down and tell them the facts without the case. Remember, I've never been a Julian Assange fanboy. I don't know the guy. I've never met him. In my experience, highly intelligent people are absolute dicks. That's just my experience. The reason I stood up so much for him, because I believe any Englishman, if they knew the facts, would go down there and have chained themselves to that Ecuadorian embassy and say, over my dead body, are you going to give him to the Americans? And that's essentially what I decided to do, because they're trying to criminalise the fourth estate here. And the fourth estate, that's they got the first three, you got the noblemen, the clergy, and the whatnot, and then you got the fourth estate, and holding them all to account, and that's what our media is meant to do. And the fourth estate is there to do the four things that I've outlined in the past. Your job as a journalist is to either gather information, like you do as a journalist, or to be a point of information that point where people can partake information and give you information. Whistleblowers can give you information, etc. Then your second job is to verify it's true. Your third job is then to publish it on a platform if it's in the public interest. And your fourth job is to protect the source at all costs if you got it from a source, because obviously they could be in peril for sharing that information with you. That job in the analog age was a difficult job to do. In the digital age, what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have done is create a platform that does that job perfectly. Perfectly. Better than anybody else in history. And if you actually look at what they've published and the scoops that they've had and the governments that they've brought to their knees, the entire nations, and they've released secrets on every country in the world almost, not just, people just say, oh, why don't they release stuff about Russia? Really, go to WikiLeaks and type in Russia, go to WikiLeaks, type in Israel. They've released information on it. They did one on the UK not long ago about a guy who went to them and just said, I just walked onto a nuclear submarine without showing any information at all, and here's how I did it. It's, if anybody knew just how important he was, they would fight tooth and nail, because if we let him go, honestly, I believe we are just buckling under to fascism, because that's what it is. It's fascism.
Well, this is the whole, the bigger picture, isn't it? It's the American global jurisdiction, and it's the UK authorities, the UK courts buckling under pressure, no independence. So I mean, this is the point that I'm getting at, that the courts are losing their legitimacy as courts.